The title of this work is called Solid Maneuvers. It was made in 2015 and it was first shown here in Germany, so it's great to have it here. The work and the title work together, so it's thinking about what is solid. How do we change from one material into another? From something that is solid, then it melts, then it becomes again another solid form. But maneuver, this is a word coming from French manœuvre, or to maneuver something, to shift or to work on something. To main, it talks about the hand, and œuvre, the work. So for me, it was interesting to think about what is the gesture of the hand. How do we make to make a work? And the œuvre, which is this, starts from already the hand sculpting and transforming something. So the work also refers to a certain kind of performativity, but performativity of labor, performativity of materials that are transformed and used in our daily lives. Here what we have as a work are materials that are coming from underneath the ground. So either petroleum related materials, that's oil-based, or mineral-based materials. So we have copper, we have brass, copper, steel, aluminum, and we also have acrylics with a petroleum-based material. We have tar also coming from the petroleum-based material. Other things that are in the sculpture are salts, which are also coming from the ground, vermiculite, which is a kind of mica, which is a kind of mineral. We have salts, white salts, pink salts, and we have heavy sands right here in the middle. And heavy sands are crushed bits of minerals. It's like breaking down the mountain into fine particles. But with the heavy sands are residues of already used materials that are ground and put together with the heavy sands. So we have copper particles or copper residues with the heavy sands in there. And the last thing here is the makeup. And here we have makeup powder that has been mixed and compressed. So the idea of makeup is also, we're using minerals, we're using materials like talc, clay, we're using different kinds of elements that are coming from the soil. So we also have mica in there. But the idea was to be able to make a work that is a translation of a mountain, of a ground, of a whole. But that translation of a whole becomes a form. So when we look in the environment and we look around us, what I most times look at is not just the houses that are there, but I'm thinking of what holes were made to be able to make something stand. So that notion of the hand transforming a place and then from solid to solid, but in between grounded, melted, sculpted to be able to create another solid form. And that's how the work becomes Solid Maneuvers. I talked about performativity, and I talk about the relationship of landscape to the body, and the body being, in a way, the thing that allows for something else to move. So I'm very much interested in gestures. What does a gesture mean? That. And how would you read it? And if you put that in different cultures, it will mean different things. But the space in between and the way of reading the body, for me, is something that is interesting in relation to working. So even when drawing, we're still in a space of performing an act. And then we can extend that from drawing on a piece of paper into space. So I can create a hole, and you can imagine that hole. So from that hole, or that bubble, I can then insert narratives. I can then maybe add another element to connect to that. And maybe I create a hole and I pull out a photographic work with a hole. So with that, you don't need so much elements. I think with performance, for me, you can be anywhere and you can create a work. You can understand that your gestures or the way of looking, a certain intensity, a certain emotion, allows for people to start reading and start having a certain kind of transmission of energy. So performance for me is energy in a way. It's drawing. It's ways of transcending worlds. It's ways of connecting different kinds of cultures together. It's ways of reading the body, reading spaces. And so for me, it joins all the mediums together. So when I'm making work, sometimes I might start with a sculptural piece, but then I realize that the performance will be the thing that allows that piece to extend beyond its physical space, but enter into another kind of space or energy. And since we talk about energy, once someone is in front of that work, you can share energy. And it's a different kind of way of extension. And so for me, those are interesting ways to think about work or to bring different materials together, drawing to performance, sculpture, installation, poetry, text-based work, social work, all kinds of works enter into a certain form of performativity, either an intimate space where you're confronted or you're with a material and you perform the act with that material, or you enter into a space where there's a whole group of huge amount of people where you are actually performing. And in everyday life, we also perform. We perform in different identities, different ways of being in the world because of the context or the cultures or the places that we are in, or the materials that we're confronted with. So for me, these are ways of really trying to negotiate the space you are in and the world that we are in. It's been a very important year, 2019, and I was a resident here at the Gropius Bau. And the interesting thing was not to come in as just a resident here, but to come in really with a project. And one of the projects that, the main work that I focused on last year at the Gropius Bau was Carved to Flow, which was a work that I started in 2017, or was shown in 2017 in Documenta 14. So the way of thinking about the work here in Gropius Bau was to be able to have a studio to be able to work in and to develop ideas, meet with people, have discussions with the team and the group of people working here, have discussions with Stephanie, and to think further on how can a work be a way of thinking within an institution. So the idea of care, the idea of repair, what does that mean? The notion of extractions, what does it mean? How can we think of support structures? So all these elements were ways of thinking around the work and using the soap as a kind of body to be able to think through different kinds of processes. And so last year we hosted events, did different talks, and now for the exhibition, it's going to be an extension of the works we did last year and to go deeper into it by proposing a workshop within the space. And we have in the space an architect whose name is Nuno Vasconcelos, and he will be helping with working with materials. So we're really looking around soil and working with the soil from Berlin, and also broken down materials from buildings, mainly concrete, to be able to think through how do we work with soils? What is soil? How can we construct, sculpt, make work with this material? And to connect that with different groups of people that will come in to learn and to extend that process. So the floor on the ground floor, room 11 here at the Gropius Bau, will host this workshop, and Nuno will be here for about 3 months, and we will be able to work further on events, on thinking of other ways of expanding the project Carved to Flow.